not just be signing CFTA tomorrow. We have to know what is available in Africa. Businesses have to know themselves. We have to make sure we expose ourselves to the opportunities in culture, in business, in entertainment in Africa. And that is what this trade fair will be doing. It will be the first ever that will be held, working with the African Union, hosted by the government of Egypt, supported by the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industries, and as well as supported by the International Trade Center for business-to-business meetings. So we invite all of you to join us in Egypt during the trade fair from the 11th to the 18th of December this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President. I will now turn to your partner. It's not possible to do it alone. The Export Development Authority of Egypt is an equal supporter and partner in this. Madam.
Thank you very much for having us today in this great event. Yes, we are hosting this event in Egypt. This is the first time that we see each other. It's a platform. It's a big platform for the African countries to present their manufacturing, their services, and all the opportunity where they can trade with each other. We have to be there, all of us. I'm inviting you all to present your countries with the manufacturing products, the services, and I'm inviting you all to see Egypt as a hosting country for all Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the African Union Commission. Sir, the African Union and Commission and the Frexim Bank are almost like brothers in this journey, are they not?
Yes, we are working together in harmony. Before this first intra-African trade fair, there used to be the All-Africa trade fairs. Somehow it could not really pick up, but this one would like it to work. And because of this partnership, our role will be to give political support to the whole process, and therefore will be in close liaison with the diplomatic missions from African member states to really work out with their national governments to ensure that we mobilize as many members of the private sector as possible. So we are very happy that we are partnering, and there's a lot of interest. For now, I'll not mention the countries, but there's a lot of interest. We'll be having these trade fairs every 2 years. Already we have 2 countries which have already been given the opportunity to host. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now comes the moment when I call on the Office of the Legal Counsel of the African Union Commission to bring the documents, the hosting agreement along, and the pen for you to sign. First, Dr. Orama. And there you have it. One last to go. and they exchange the documents. And that makes it official. Congratulations. Thank you. Now, in a few moments, we'll be going to our final panel. We are waiting for His Excellency, the President of South Africa. I will tell you that there's a joint press conference on the intra-African trade fair. Afrexim Bank, the African Union, and the Egyptian government will be having a press conference, a joint press conference at 5:30 p.m. So that's in approximately about an hour and 15 minutes. For those who are interested, you can find that in the Media Center, MH1, all the way to your left. A joint press conference. So we're minutes away from the final panel here before we get some closing remarks from Commissioner Muchanga and a vote of thanks. But it's been quite a day, hasn't it? I had the opportunity to speak to His Excellency, my former president as a Nigerian, about the significance and how symbolic this was. And I see you here, and every time I have a micro, oh, you always give me that face. Your Excellency, if you could bear with me just to say a few words, because you said, I love speaking to you, because you do speak from the heart. And the significance of this, you were telling me earlier, is not little. I just want you, if you could, to tell the audience what you told me. This is no ordinary program. This is no ordinary day. It's very significant. How significant, Your Excellency?
Mark, I thought you are my friend.
I am your friend.
You know, in my part of the world, we believe that whatever we say to a friend, he will keep it secret. And I thought that what I shared with you immediately after lunch was meant to be between me and you. Mark, what I was saying is that this, to my own mind, is the third most significant event that is happening in Africa since our independence in the late 50s and early 1960s. The first, to my own mind, is the signing of the OAU Charter in 1963. And that charter took us some distance. It completed the decolonization process of Africa. And it even eliminated apartheid. The next important, most important event in the process of our strength and strengthening of our development is the Constitutive Act of AU. That, again, was very momentous. It transformed OAU. It appreciated what OAU had been able to do, And it did take us away from OAU a few levels. OAU made sacrosanct the borders that we inherited and non-interference in the affairs of any other country. AU allow intervention. It's most significant as far as I'm concerned. You cannot treat your countrymen with impunity because, for whatever reason, because they are Africans. Nigerians are Africans. And since the president of South Africa is here, South Africans are Africans. And we cannot treat our citizens with impunity. If you do so, AU can intervene in your country and deal with you appropriately. We have done that. And people don't realize how important these things are. And today, or tomorrow, we will be signing what the founding fathers of OAU 55 years ago thought would be happening, which for 55 years did not happen. It will be happening tomorrow. I congratulate all our leaders for this. To me, it's most significant. And may I also take this opportunity on behalf of all of you that are here, welcome President Ramaphosa and congratulate him. And like I said in the morning, also congratulate all our brothers and sisters in South Africa for their transition process.
Eshe Gidigan, sir. Eshe Gidigan. I told you this was a special day. I said it was a special day, and indeed it is. We are lucky to have such esteemed company on this very important day. We're coming to the closing plenary, and as my president just said, it is an honor to have with us the president of South Africa. This last closing plenary is so very important because we've been talking all day about what we want to achieve, the brave new world of one market. But who's going to pay for it? Where's the money? You have to build roads. Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to finance that? That is the question. Now, Africa's Agenda 2063 aspires to world-class infrastructure. And by 2045, we should be able to enable intracontinental trade to grow from up to 50%, more than 50% from the about 18% we've heard about today. And Africa's total contribution to global trade, which we heard was 3%, should rise to 12%. But we need the infrastructure and we need to pay for it. There are large financing gaps. And to realize this ambition, the existence of capital isn't necessarily an issue. The money is there. The money is there. It's the mechanisms. We lack the mechanisms to make it available. But we're going to talk about how we can get through that. So without much ado, I'm going to invite to the stage your first panelist and the chair of this panel, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa. And I think somebody can come. Yes, they've got your name here. Right here, sir. Yes. And one thing you don't know is my first interview when I was at the BBC, my first interview when I was at the BBC as a correspondent in South Africa was with you. And I was nervous, but I didn't show it. And you put me at ease because you said, nice tie. Yeah. So if I look nervous through the other, just say nice tie, and I'll be absolutely fine. Next, I will call up, you just saw him sign a hosting agreement. You'll hopefully be seeing him in person in December. You will come to Cairo? You will come to Cairo? Say yes? Yes, excellent. Benedict Orama, President and Chairman of the Board, African Export-Import Bank. Please come join us. Gabriel Negatu is the regional manager for the African Development Bank, and that's the Africa Development Bank, very important partner. Gabriel, where are you? Come join us. Are you here? Yes, Gabriel, ladies and gentlemen, Gabriel Negatu. Another important bank that's doing some great work is the Bank of Kigali here in Rwanda. The CEO of the Bank of Kigali is Diane Karusisi. Where is Diane? Diane, hello, come join us. And then we're so lucky because when I saw this man's name on the list of participants, I wanted him so much to be on my panel, right there, Dan. James Mwangi, a name that many people would recognize. Where's James? James, where are you? James! They had you down as a special intervention. I said, no, 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 a special guest. A special guest. James Mwangi. Okay, shall we begin? I'll do away with this microphone because I think I can use this. Your Excellency, can you? Yes, I can see you over there. I'll begin with you. Welcome. Now, we've had an amazing day, some real incredible interventions. And you coming here towards the end lifts it and takes us all the way to the finishing line. We are going to drill down about money and about finance, but I'm not going to ask you that first. I'm going to ask you a very simple question. As one of the biggest engines in Africa, South Africa, your participation and support of the continental free trade area for Africa is essential. Without South Africa, it cannot succeed. I just want to get into your head and your thoughts as to how significant you think the African continental free trade area was. Because it was in South Africa that I moderated a panel at the ordinary session of the African Union in June of 2015 in Johannesburg. And afterwards, I spoke to journalists. They were so dismissive. You Africans, you can't do anything. It's implementation. You'll never get there. You'll never make an agreement. Look, we're here. Tomorrow, we're signing. It's becoming a reality. We proved them wrong. We proved them wrong, right? But, as President Kagame said, the work isn't over. The work's just begun. Sir.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here, President Obasanjo. It's good to see you, looking as youthful as ever, and as energetic as ever, and as vocal as ever. It's good to see you, sir. I guess tomorrow is quite a historic day for the whole continent. And as President Obasanjo said, this was conceptualized by our founding fathers of the OAU, and later African Union, who dreamt and visualized this day when the whole of the African continent would collectively embark on this unbelievable journey of transforming Africa into a free trade area. This was bound to happen. It has been a long time coming. But as they say in the classics, it's better late than never. And now we are here. And this is the moment for the African continent. A free trade area for Africa is going to be like a flood. A trade flood that is going to lift all the boats. It is not so much about South Africa, that without South Africa this can't take off. No. It's much more about all of us as countries of Africa. This cannot be done without all the countries of Africa participating, big and small. And this is an opportunity that is going to yield great benefits for small countries as well as big countries. And in a way, this is going to create a level playing field for both small companies and big companies to be able to participate in real meaningful business of trading products or goods and services right across the African continent. And we, as political leaders, through this agreement are now going to open up pathways, avenues, opportunities for our economies to grow on the African continent. They have been held back by the strictures that we had imposed of borders, of real concrete borders that impeded trade, as well as investment to flow through in various countries on the African continent. And tomorrow, when we sign, it is going to be like a new dawn, a new beginning for the African continent. So tomorrow, we will herald a real new beginning as Africa begins to demonstrate what it is really worth, that it is a continent of traders, a continent of people who are entrepreneurial by nature, who want to do business and who want to succeed. And in our case, it is also going to be an opportunity of being able to grow our economies in the biggest way. So opportunity beckons for African companies, opportunity beckons for African countries to be catapulted to a much higher level of growth. So this is going to be the engine that we've been waiting for as Africa to grow our economies. And tomorrow we ignite, or we start this engine, and Africa is ready to take off. And it will take off tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, let's drill down to the subject matter we're talking about, because we need to come up with innovative ways to finance. The funding gap, the trade finance gap is huge, it's massive. It's billions of dollars that we need in order to boost intra-Africa trade under the AFCFTA. I think I'll begin first by going to Benedict Orama, because Afreximbank doesn't just, it's not just talking about it, it's doing a lot. You've invested, or you've pledged that you will invest, I think, $25 billion over 5 years. Is that correct? I want you to talk about how that current trade finance gap can be bridged.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Obasanjo, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. The important thing is to do what we have to do. We've talked for too long. And I think this is an opportunity for institutions like the African Export-Import Bank to step up. For 24 years, African Export-Import Bank had operated like a fish in a shallow water. Because when it was created in 1993, the expectation was that shortly afterwards, this integration process would start, following the Lagos Plan of Action and the Abuja Accord and so on. But it took so long. So from tomorrow, we will now operate like a fish in a deep water. We thrived. We thrived as we operated in shallow waters. So we are going to make sure that the bank not only prospers, but the whole continent also prospers. We've committed to disburse $25 billion in support of intra-African trade from 2017 up to 2021 ending. Last year, we did $4 billion. We've already created trade confirmation lines
Lines of credit.
For 50 banks in Africa to do intra-regional trade confirmations. Our plan is to bring that number to 500. Those 50 trade confirmation lines amounted to about $800 million. We expect that we'll reach about $6 to $8 billion by the time we complete that process. We have identified hubs, intra-African trade hubs, and we've worked with them to become centers for transmitting the benefits of trade, centers for providing bulk financing to support the trade. In Egypt, we did what we call the Egypt-Africa Trade Promotion Program. So the $500 million program, that was exhausted in 1 year, and we increased it to $1 billion. Your Excellency, just last week, we signed with Export Credit and Insurance Corporation of South Africa a $1 billion South Africa Trade and Investment Promotion Program. And the plan, again, is to support the trade between South Africa and the rest of Africa. Risk is critical. Many African businesses, many African banks worry about the unknown, the markets they don't know. But Afreximbank, given its preferred creditor status, given its knowledge of the continent, has developed a program we call AFGAP, Afreximbank Guarantees. So under that, we are providing country risk guarantees, investment guarantees in support of the trade. We believe that with all this support, we will be able to play our role to make sure that the political commitments that we made tomorrow result to the economic benefits the continent expects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. I'm going to move right to my left here now. I love Kigali. I love Rwanda. I think everybody's a beautiful city and a beautiful country, is it not? Fantastic hosts. And there's a certain level of maturity in everything you do, including the banking system and the way you go about your financial services. I know that this country has ambitions to be a financial capital, a financial center of Africa. This is a very specific question. It's all very well if a bank works well like yours, but it's also got to work. National development banks, regional, continental banks have all got to support commercial banks. They've all got to work together. How do you see this group working together towards something like this, or taking advantage of a platform like the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Thank you very much for the question. Your Excellencies and distinguished participants, we see this as a huge opportunity. On the one hand, you have unmet demand of trade financing of over 100 billion. So you have people out there, business people, who are looking for money to trade. But on the other hand, you also have increasing requirements in terms of compliance for commercial banks like ourselves, increasing capital requirements, etc., that are making banks risk-averse to take on these opportunities. And what the president of Afreximbank is saying is that they're setting up infrastructures and a framework to make sure banks can work together. So we recently received from Afreximbank a call for expression of interest to become one of their, they call it, trade finance intermediary. So we look forward to doing that because this will unleash the opportunity and will call for risk appetite for our banks here in the region to work with Afreximbank to make sure we can support traders. In the region, Rwanda is a country of traders. I think, back in the days, people were trading for a living, and it's still the case here. But only less than 10% of the trades that happens in the country is coming through banks. So we want to increase our market share. We want to learn more, and I think these partnerships, like the one the president of Afreximbank is talking about, is going to help us upskill our staff in the trade finance department, but also raise awareness in the trading community, in the business community, that we have the right products for them to be able to trade more in the region and create more value. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was very clear. I'm going to move over to your fellow banker, James Wangi, now. this opportunity of a continental free trade area here in Africa will require not just traditional methods of financing, finance instruments, but non-traditional, innovative trade finance instruments. They're necessary to raise Africa's productivity, support Africa's industrialization. I'm not by no means a finance expert. I'm an enthusiast, but I'm not an expert. Can you crystal ball gaze for me, James, and paint a picture of what possibly could be the next level, this next stage of innovation in trade finance?
Thank you very much. As you have rightly said, this continental free trade area provides a huge opportunity for banks. But for banks to be able to unlock that opportunity, they need to transform themselves. I think the first innovation requires to be at the regulation level. As we have said, we are now in one free trade area, but the regulations governing the banks are as different as the 55 countries. We need to harmonize the regulatory policies and, of course, the monetary policies to enable that. I think the next innovation is to see how we can enhance convertibility of currencies.
That's a big issue.
It's a very, very big issue. We have roughly as many currencies as we have the countries. And most of these countries are not convertible directly.
Yes, in the previous panel, there was a great line that I think I'll hear again, very tweetable, that we are colonized by currencies. I mean, that's a pretty strong line. But they do get the point. 30 currencies, multiplicity of currencies, and very few of them are convertible. We still have to go through somebody else's money. How do we get over that?
That is the biggest challenge. Until we undo that, then we continue to have challenges, because then the financial system in Africa will not on its own be able to solve the problem. As long as we have to hop out of the country to achieve convertibility of our currencies.
What are some of the solutions to that then?
I think one of the biggest solutions would be the possibility of looking at transiting or transitioning to a single currency for a single trading free area. That would be an ideal position. But before we achieve that, we could try and get the regulators and the central banks to try and allow transferability of currencies through the clearing houses. But the problem then is left with them about the stability of the currencies because of the sovereign risks that goes with the individual currencies across the borders. So that needs to be dealt with. But however, we can also be very innovative and create a single mobile switch. We talked about mobile money across the African continent, but if you look at it, it is country-centric. We need a switch that will be able to interconnect all these mobile money and e-commerce platform. If you look at the credit cards or plastic money, as traditionally called, you'll see that we operate on a single switch capability. But that is not true of our e-commerce and our mobile commerce. So essentially, we need as banks to be able to create that switch. Lastly, what banks can do best for the continent is to help formalize the informal trade in Africa. Because you'll notice that the rails offered by banks to facilitate and to be a catalyst for trade are very formal. Yet, the population that is being enabled is informal. So as they go into continental trade, we need to formalize them. So there's need for entrepreneurship training, coaching, and mentoring, so that they are now in a more global continental trade space as opposed to the domestic trade. Because unless we do that, then essentially we'll be facilitating foreign trade within a free African continental trade area. So it is important we really develop and ensure that the enterprises that are going to industrialize and to build industries in Africa have roots in Africa, because ultimately we want the wealth to be created and retained on the African continent.
And one of the byproducts of bringing the informal into the formal is that you can bring them into the tax structure, which is the revenue streams any government needs to truly see development. You can't do it without raising your tax base. I'm going to move on now. I can see that my brother Benedict is itching to get in there, but can I just ask for a second that we move on to Gabriel Negatu over the African Development Bank. You just heard both His Excellency and the other members of the panel discuss some of the innovative solutions that we need, how we're going to bridge the current finance gap, and also how we're not really going to leave people behind, because it's not just talking, we're not just talking about the big deals, we're also talking right to the ground, to the traders on the ground. I just want you to tell me from the African Development Bank's perspective how we are going to bridge this trade finance gap, and maybe some of the things that the African Development Bank has cooking at the moment.
Good. Thank you very much. I think I join James and others in some of the views expressed, but what is clear here is that the issue of resources, financing is not, I mean, though it's used as an excuse to explain why things are not happening, is really not where the real bottleneck is. In an environment where you have excess global liquidity, why is trade finance difficult in Africa? Clearly, there are some specific reasons, and you know, I can go through a few of them and then talk about what the African Development Bank is doing. But the first thing that we're seeking to do is to unlock financing by institutional investors, both African and non-African. That's African sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and others, to come into the region and invest in trade finance. But there are, again, reasons why they're not coming, and part of the reason has to be that the regulatory environment, the doing business environment, and so on, is not conducive, is not attractive enough. And that's why they seem to be staying away. They perceive risk to be much higher in Africa than it is anywhere else in the world, which in reality is not true, but it's a perception, and perception has a premium in this case. So what we are trying to do at the African Development Bank is address these issues at several levels. One is through our own direct investments into lines of credit, into institutions such as the Afro-Exim Bank, the regional banks such as PTA Bank, and regional institutions such as Africa Trade Insurance Guarantee institutions. And what this does is two things. One, it provides financing for trade. And second, it helps de-risk these investment opportunities, so that through these institutions, we are both directly and indirectly investing to promote intra-Africa trade, both through direct investment and by de-risking the perceived risk by international partners.
Now, I'll bring in Benedict Orama here, because I know you wanted to respond to some of those things, but as you do, I want you to drill down on what Afrexim Bank is currently doing to contribute towards addressing the issue of the continental payment system, with, of course, a view to boosting the AFC, intra-Africa trade in the AFC-CFTA, in the context of the AFC-FTA.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted to respond to our brother James, because the switch he's looking for is just near him. We in Afrexim have been working over the years to put in place an intra-African payment and settlement platform. We are aware that it's not normal that only 12.8% of payments that originate from Africa end in Africa. And also, most of the settlements, all the payments from Africa settled outside, with 37% done in the United States. So we believe that having fragmented markets, fragmented currencies, will be a big burden on the expectations of the CFTA. So we have been working to put in place this platform. And that platform, the primary objective is to facilitate payment and settlements across borders in Africa, and to do it in local currency, to do it in such a way that it reduces the foreign currency component of intra-African trade. We're able to do this because we're not regulated by any central bank as a multilateral. We have trade finance intermediaries around Africa. So we are able to provide the facilities and support the clearing and the settlement. We expect that this project will come on stream before year end. We are going to start the pilot with 6 countries which have been identified. Maybe around September it will be on board, and subsequently for next year it will be expanded. We've had extensive discussions with the regional payment systems, COMESA especially, and the West African payment system that is about to come on stream. The idea is that once we have it all done, to see how we can use that to integrate the payment platforms that currently exist. And we believe that that platform, once we start it and are able to gather data, we will be able to begin giving small trade finance lines to small operators that are able to use them. And it will be a vehicle for also formalizing informal trade, because many of the participants there will be the informal traders. If you permit me 1 minute, I will also address the issue of informal trade. Our own assessment in the bank is that the large proportion of informal intra-African trade, $40 to $60 billion, is evidence of institutional failure. It's because there are no institutions that currently conduct the trade. That is why a small trader will leave Rwanda, for example, with say $1,000 to go to Kenya to buy a few things and come here. If there are trading companies that do this, they will not engage in this expensive and inefficient way of trade. So we have also launched a program to promote export trading companies across Africa. One of the things we are doing is developing the regulatory framework that will make it possible for countries to register export trading companies, and we then provide lines of credit and provide domestic letters of credit to make it possible for those to buy from SMEs. I'm sure nobody here can tell me 2 or 3 South Korean companies exporting across the world. If you ask anybody about South Korea, they will mention Samsung. Samsung is also a major trading company, apart from being a technology company that we know it for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, through the day this has been an incredible platform where we've heard real plain speaking from some of the biggest voices in business saying what they want from policymakers, what they want from government. They're ready to come together and join hands under the AFCFTA and make it a reality, but they need to work with policymakers to encourage policies that work for them. You are one individual who has had a unique experience in life. You went from being a leading businessman in your country to being the leader of your country. So from that perspective, from having seen both sides of the coin, what are the changes that you're thinking about in South Africa with regards to changing the regulatory environment and fast-tracking policies that would ensure that all these things that we're talking about take off and effectively contribute to the continent's infrastructure needs?
Well, thank you. It's much more about thinking about, say, South Africa, but more thinking about the continent. And I think that's what we should focus on, how we can use this enormous opportunity of establishing a free trade area which covers the whole continent to unlock the great opportunities, the great capabilities that this can yield. I mean, clearly the very first one is the infrastructure process. We need to roll out infrastructure on the continent that is going to be able to support trade. Trade can only really take off if we have good infrastructure. And as they say that if you really want to grow your economy, improve your infrastructure first. And this we should be able to do as regulators. That's what we should focus on, but that's where we also need partners. We need a business community to be our partners. And we also need to work on how we can de-risk infrastructure projects so that we can attract finance for infrastructure projects that we can have across the continent. And having done so, we will then be able to utilize trade as a key grower of our economies. Because once you have good infrastructure, trade naturally follows. And I can say that, you know, Africans are traders, and once you have good infrastructure, they will start trading on their own, and all we need to do as regulators is to set up good trading mechanisms and processes. For instance, the financial system needs to be in place. What I'm particularly attracted to is the notion that has been put forward about having a tradable currency. Now, I would support that, because for really good trade to take place on the continent, you need to know that you can trade effectively and trade profitably and utilize a currency that you can trade with right across the continent. And maybe setting up this free trade area means that we need to have an African currency that all of us can utilize. Now, if we look at, for instance, Europe, their trade started taking off once they had a single currency.
Yes, that's right.
The hour, the day, and the moment could have arrived for Africa to have its own currency, so that we get out of our heads this colonial mentality of relying on other people's currency. And we can match that currency with the others, so that you have an African, whatever you call it, matching 1-to-1 with the dollar. That'll be fantastic.
That would be beautiful. That would be beautiful. In fact, in the previous panel, I mean, this is a really innovative room here. Someone even mentioned the idea of a Pan-African digital currency, a Pan-African Bitcoin. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a good idea as well. I would support that, but I think it needs to feed into a notion of a currency that even a small trader, and we have plethora of small traders on the African continent, and the free trade area that we are going to create will just lift them up, and if we have a single currency, that will just make them fly. So that's what we should do.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm going to go back now to Diane and stay on this idea of SMEs. You're an SME, you face significant barriers to finance wherever you are in Africa. I don't think I've ever been to one African country where it's easy if you have a dream and you have the fortitude to pursue that dream, to find finance, to find capital when you're starting out. How do you think we can harness the free movement of capital through the CFTA to capitalize SMEs, almost as these, like, I guess you could call them vectors for Africa's transformation?
I think we need to start, of course, by saving more as Africans, but we also need to have a framework that connects banks. So in this forum, I've met a number of bankers from other countries, and we're already starting discussions and seeing how we can connect our banks more, because in some countries, there's more liquidity than in others. So these banks need to be able to transfer the liquidity here, to be traded here. Because most times you'll see, I was meeting, for example, with colleagues from Angola, and they were telling me they have millions of dollars somewhere, overseas. And of course, they don't get any return on that money. This is on a current account. And I was telling them, look, we have demand here. Maybe we can find a way to work together. So we get a return, and we also support the economy, an African economy. So obviously, there are differences between countries, but there are obviously also some countries that have more savings, more liquidity than others. And we need to find a way to work together as Africans to really support our economies. Because ultimately, if the Rwandan economy is doing better, there'll definitely be spillover effects on Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya. And in the end, everyone benefits. So we really need to find a way to work together as banks. And we have continental and regional banks. We really need to find a way to connect to them so everyone is able to see which bank has more liquidity, how can we trade interbank, and we'll support each other and support our economies. I think we really need to get to that point. And the idea of having Pan-African digital currency is a great one. I think someone was saying in the previous panel that countries in Eastern Africa slashed the roaming fees before the EU did it. So there's also an opportunity for us to leapfrog and create our own currency. Because when you look at trade finance, I don't know for other commercial banks here, but it's extremely paper intensive, which comes obviously with risk of fraud, of errors. And we need to find a way to make trade finance more efficient, less risky, and we can only do this through technology. And there are today blockchain technologies with use cases that are being addressed for trade finance. We really need to get our young technology people here to try these technologies and make sure we can leapfrog and support our continent. Thank you.
And then when you're talking about new technologies, Gabriel, you're talking about instruments for financial inclusion. I mean, if you look at smartphones, if you look at mobile money platforms, as we build this free trade area, it is a tremendous opportunity to harness that technology and use it to bring more people out of poverty, financial inclusion. We talked about SMEs and the like. What is the African Development Bank's take on this with regards to the CFTA?
Thank you. The whole industry of the fintech, combining the technology and finance, is something that I think whose time has come and is beginning to take off. And certain countries like Kenya and others in this region are far ahead of the rest of the continent. We at the African Development Bank, of course, see financial inclusion as a critical element of growing the financial sector. Now, given the size of the institution, it is rather difficult and perhaps not cost-effective to work directly with the small SMEs that you and Diane have just discussed. But what we've been doing is supporting institutions across the continent to come up with innovative products and services. In fact, I dare say across the region, we are putting resources into new instruments, whether it's risk guarantee instruments or partial risk guarantee, credit risk guarantee, and other innovative products and services that promotes financial inclusion. But we do this through intermediary institutions, local banks. James Mwangi's Equity Bank is one of our partners, and several of the partners around this room have benefited from the support of the African Development Bank to promote innovation and financial inclusion at the SME level and even below.
Your Excellency, I'm going to break protocol and stand up from this, but I'm not asking you to stand up. I'm going to go down and I'm going to find, I know there are 4 people in the audience already that have interventions and questions or statements. So I'm going to go find them and get ready. Okay, so Prince Randy Alamsogun is from Benin Republic. Very interesting chap. He was in Kano recently on a solar project, investing in a solar project. Where are you, Prince Randy? Stand up and make yourself known. Aha, Prince Randy, you're doing some very interesting investing. This panel is probably the most important and interesting panel for you. What are your thoughts? Maybe you come over here so they can see you.
I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you, Mark, for having me. You've done a great work, by the way. I think Mark deserves a round of applause for his great, you know.
What did he say?
On his farm. Okay.
Solar panel on his farm.
Your Excellency, President Ramaphosa, distinguished guests, all your excellencies, thank you for being here today. I am Prince Randy Kusualam Sogon from the Republic of Benin, from Abomey, more precisely. And actually the mother of former President Obasanjo is from there, is from Benin. So it's a great honor. So Mark, on your recent comment, yes, I was in Kano, Nigeria recently. My firm, Black Lion Holdings, which is an investment management firm, we have about $8 billion under management since last year. We work a lot in the background, in the shadows, because what we do is that we support special purpose vehicles that are used to finance large infrastructure and energy projects in Africa. What we have done in Kano last week is to support a company called RenSource Energy, and we've signed a contract with the Sabongari market in Kano to supply electricity storage devices to 11,000 stores in Kano that normally don't have electricity. They use power generators, which are very hazardous and bad wiring. There's been fires, there's been all kinds of accidents. So now with clean energy, using pure solar power installed on the roof of the Sabongari market, we are able to power 11,000 stores. And that's just phase one. Phase two will be 18,000 stores. And that's a project that Black Lion is supporting with debt for about $6 million US. Regarding infrastructure projects, as former President Obasanjo was saying, and President Ramaphosa was emphasizing, and many people have emphasized here, we cannot talk about intra-Africa trading and regional integration without solid infrastructure. Energy. Energy is the blood of development. Energy is the blood of industrialization. If SMEs should produce more so that they can trade more, but those companies need to function 100%. But when they don't have electricity, they cannot function 100%. So people like us, firms like Black Lion, support projects that make those energy, this infrastructure happen, the highways, the ports, the airports, the ports, etc., the factories, and so on. There is currently an excess of savings in global financial markets. Nearly $100 trillion is available through pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, excess cash on balance sheets from successful companies, and so on. How does Africa tap into that? We have a financial gap for infrastructure of $170 billion per year, which means, Mark, in the next 10 years, Africa needs $1.7 trillion just to meet that gap. This money is available, but how do you make it happen? Is you structure the project properly, which I commend RDB as one of the rare investment agencies in Africa who has been really doing a great professional job in how to package projects to make them financially viable and attractive. Also, NEPAD is in this room. Simera Johnson from NEPAD. NEPAD has been put together by the African Union to prepare projects, to make them professionally presentable, to make them viable, to make them attractive. And this is what us, financial intermediaries, financial institutions, we like to look at so that we can make a project happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Randy. Randy says there's trillions and trillions of dollars out there that we need to bring here in order for that to be a reality. My esteemed panel, who wants to take that? How do we tap in? Yes, Your Excellency.
Clearly, I think there's quite a lot of money that we need to bring to the continent and to harness if trade is to happen in the way that we have conceptualized it. It requires that money to be brought here, and we need to use institutions like our brother was articulating there, and a whole number of others. Banks on the African continent also need to be streetwise. They need to make themselves relevant to the small traders. I think the key traders are your small, informal traders that the big banks always just ignore. They do trade and financing above the heads of your small traders. And I'd like to see our banks coming up forward and coming up with products that are going to be much more relevant for your informal traders, for your small traders in the deep rural areas of Africa, in the deep, small urban areas of our cities. That is where finance is most needed. And so therefore they need to package their finance products in a way that we can bring all those trillions of dollars that you're talking about to come and fuel the trade that is bound to take place in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think what we need to do is to develop our capital markets. I'll give you an example. Bank of Kigali is listed on the Rwanda Stock Exchange, and we have about 30% of shareholders overseas. So I think what we need to do is our best projects, our SMEs, they should list an IPO on the stock exchange. Of course, there's a process they have to go through. But again, we are all here to help them. And it's a very easy and great instrument to attract funds from abroad.
You're absolutely right. Capital markets in Africa need to be deepened. They need more sophisticated technology. Many of them are anemic. They don't have enough stock, and if they do, one stock dominates. Look at my country, Nigeria. Almost 50% is one country, Dangote. And also countries always feel as if they have to have a stock exchange. It's like having a flag. Isn't consolidation a better idea? Bring them together?
Maybe. I think for the regions, we should look at, when we look at our region, East African community, I think there's a good case to make a regional stock exchange as opposed to have small stock exchanges in every country.
Which could be under the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Absolutely. And this would attract capital not only from the region, but also from abroad. So I think there's a good case there, and this would support this initiative.
The ideas are flowing, Your Excellency. They're flowing. Now, I'm going to go on. All this is very well, but we have to be sustainable. We have to look after the environment. There is no point building bridges and infrastructure rapidly if our environment is damaged. It's not sustainable. This is our opportunity right here to build a sustainable future for ourselves. Now, the question is, how do we do that? Sheila Agarwal Khan is the Director for the Policy and Program Division for the United Nations Environmental Program, known as UNEP. They're based in Kigali in Kenya, I believe. Sheila, where are you? Aha, Sheila, wow, you got me out there. And Sheila thinks we should be sustainable.
Thank you. So, as you said, I'm Sheila Agarwal Khan, that's good, with the UN Environment Program. We've recently established a Sustainable Africa Finance Facility, and you might ask, why is an environmental institution coming into your world? Well, actually, we're not doing the financing. But what's happening is we're getting banks coming to us and saying, hey, we're seeing the environment as an opportunity for bringing in investment. It's a new trend. It's not the old story which says, okay, protect the environment just for the sake of future generations, but rather, in addition to doing that, you can make money off the environment. Some of you already talked about clean energy in agribusinesses. It makes you more profitable if you can bring the costs down in terms of your value chain. We're looking at land management issues that will preserve biodiversity, that will preserve soil organic carbon, increase productivity, And the banks are coming to us. We have 2 banks that have partnered with us, BNP Paribas and Rabobank, who are saying, please bring us large projects which are bankable, so profitable, but that must have an environmental and social element in it. They're receiving inputs from high-value investors, institutional investors, all kinds of players who are saying they want to invest in a kind of impact investment type of approach where they can say their money goes to not just an economically viable venture, but something that is also bringing environment and social benefits. And what we're seeing is the environment is proving to be, in a number of cases, something that can bring profit as well as protect the environment. So this is a partnership. We've started it with a number of institutions, both from the commercial side, from the non-governmental side, and the banks. We're open to other partners. If you have any ideas of how we can build this partnership, we're welcome to receiving those. What our biggest challenge is with these banks is they want to see very big projects. They want to see projects in the order of 50 to 100 million. And what we're finding is that if we can aggregate, and comes back to this whole issue of intra-trade in Africa, if we can aggregate projects of a similar nature together through some kind of a special project vehicle that could bring things together. For example, we have companies coming to us in the tea sector and saying, how can we look at clean energy to fuel the factories, and at the same time, better land management to improve productivity and conservation at the same time. If we can bring these through a number of different farms together at a very large scale across, say, East and Southern Africa, which is some of the projects that are coming to us, we might be able to push and get some of these bigger projects together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to react to that, or can I take another intervention? Okay, so Andrew Mwenda is the owner and founder of the independent newspaper. Andrew Mwenda. Andrew, where are you? Andrew, right here. Good, you're close. You're from Uganda. Yes. Yeah, and I know you were eager to talk to James and His Excellency Cyril. What is it you want to tell them?
I am eager to speak to this audience here. Your Excellencies, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am the oldest man in this room at 105. So I first want to address myself to His Excellency Ramaphosa. I think that to do big things, you need to begin with small things. We are seated in a country called Rwanda. Right now, Rwandan students, Rwandan traders, Rwandan investors cannot even get visas to travel to South Africa, and we are talking of digital currencies. So I have this belief that Africa needs to settle the smaller problems. Let us first make a spear before we plan a nuclear weapon. So can we have Rwandans given visas to go to South Africa? Let me give you another example. I have a Ugandan friend who is Ugandan Rwandan. He went to South Africa, imported goods worth $1 million, so he paid you $1 million. Then he missed his flight and his visa expired by 1 day. 1 day. The next day when he came to catch his flight, the South African immigration officials declared him persona non grata and kicked him out. He appealed to the South African High Commission in Uganda, did every single thing under the... He can no longer go back to South Africa to give you the next $1 million.
Mention his name and you'll write it down, right?
He's called Herbert Mujisha. So, Mr. President, I really find these things depressing. Now, let me come to trade. Having said that, really, at a micro... In case you don't have to feel so guilty, my own country, Uganda, has been disturbing Rwandans entering it. So, so you are not alone in this. But let me come to the issue I wanted to raise. You see, international trade is a form of hierarchy. Some countries produce cotton, others weave cloth, others market high fashion. How much you earn from international trade depends on your position in that international division of labor. Now, I'm using the language of the 1940s. I told you I'm old. In the modern lexicon, they say in that value chain. Some countries mine iron, others make steel, others sell automobiles. How much you earn from international trade is dependent on which position you occupy in that value chain. When we talk of African trade, or let me put it this way, when we talk of development, Development is a process of upgrading from low-quality products to high-end products. Just imagine you produce cotton like my country, Uganda. You earn 1.9% of the international market price. When you make cloth, you earn about 15%. But when you market high fashion, Dolce & Gabbana, Versace, Zegna, you earn 65% of the international market price. For as long as we do not discuss Africa's movement from the production and export of raw materials to value-added products at the high end, we will remain mired in poverty, whether we begin digital currencies, whether we do everything under the sun. Now, let me conclude what I want to say. So what I'm talking about is industry and manufacturing. Please go online and look at the World Bank and all other statistics. Across Africa, our continent is deindustrializing. Do you know that? It means manufacturing as a share of GDP is either going down, stagnant. In the best of countries, it is growing slowly. Ladies and gentlemen, let us get serious and trade seriously. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. You have to respond to that, Your Excellency.
No, he was trying to make me feel guilty. No, there's no guilt. I think the issue of visas by Rwandese to South Africa, consider it as a matter that is solved. We were talking earlier with President Kagame, and we've decided that we are going to put the relationship between South Africa and Rwanda on a much better footing. And the gaps and the challenges that we've had are going to be resolved. And we've got two very outstanding, beautiful ministers of international relations who are going to work on this immediately. They are going to work on this, bring us solutions, and President Kagame and I are going to solve and just sign off what the two sisters are going to bring to the table. So if you ever wanted to blame anyone, you can blame our two beautiful sisters. They are going to solve the problem. So consider that one in the solved basket. We are going to solve it because, and we're solving it based on principle. And the principle here is you cannot have Africa as a free trade area and impede the movement of people and business opportunities. You cannot have that. So we are going to solve it based on that principle, and that, this principle of having a free trade area in Africa unlocks a lot of opportunities, including visas being resolved, including the flow of money, the flow of people, and everything else. So what President Obasanjo was talking about the dream of our forefathers, will lead to us freeing our people to move, freeing visas. So visas are going to be solved, my dear brother. Thank you very much.
And with that, I would ask all of you to please stand up and join me over here. I want you to acknowledge the closing plenary of this wonderful business forum, ladies and gentlemen. Please rise and acknowledge the applause from the crowd. That was excellent. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask you to exit stage right, I think, over here. I think probably over here is the safest way. And then we're going to conclude. Now this is the wrap-up session and the closure. We've heard a lot today, and real food for thought. We saw history already in the making. Can you feel the change? The change is in the air. I'm going to call on Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Trade and Industry, who's been listening closely at the African Union Commission, to come and present a summary of some of the key messages arising from this AFCFTA Business Summit. Please give Ambassador Albert Muchanga a round of applause as one of our last speakers.
Could you be seated?
Please be seated. Please be seated. You can take your seats, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremony. Before I do the summary, I'm going to take an opinion poll. Those who feel that this has been a very productive and successful forum, could you give a loud applause? Thank you very much. Those who feel that this has been a very useless and unfruitful forum, could you give an applause? I think the verdict is very clear that we have done very well. We must be very proud of ourselves. So the first session, the business forum, the key messages that came out are the following. First, competitiveness of logistics systems such as roads, rail, sea, and air, made in Africa industrial revolution should be given by a competitive logistics framework which eases connectivity to markets. The second outcome was that coherence between trade facilitation and investment facilitation. After the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area, member states have to streamline non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers to facilitate movement of goods. This also includes dealing with the rent-seeking border officials and transport costs in order to improve the experiences of regional integration in Africa. The third outcome was with regard to innovative financing solutions. Africa has registered significant progress with respect to mobile money, financial services, and small business technological innovation. There is no doubt that e-commerce is a driver of trade and industrial development. Then we go to the opening plenary, and the summary is as follows. First, the African Continental Free Trade Area represents an opportunity to launch a different type of integration after 55 years of political union. For this to be effective, we need judicial and legal security, national administration that should meet the expectations, and appropriation by the beneficiaries should also be of an utmost priority. Second outcome, we are taking the right direction. We need to raise our ambition, ratify and reform. The numbers do not lie. It is us to blame if we cannot change the numbers. We have to stop enjoying problems while we have answers to our problems. And change is coming to Africa, but slowly. We need to go fast. And this is a direct quotation from the chairperson of the African Union and president of this great country. The third outcome, sensitization is key, and it should not only be from top, but also from bottom to as well. This came from the champion, the president of Niger, His Excellency Issoufou Mahamadou. The next outcome, the African Continental Free Trade Area to be successful, we need to establish necessary conducive environment at national level, establish economic governance at national level, and be ready for integration. Again, this was a message from the champion of the African Continental Free Trade Area. No, this was a message from the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat. The next outcome, it is equally important to give the private sector the tool to expand and move fast and efficient implementation, as well as the effective use of the African Continental Free Trade Area Country Business Index. After that, we come to the first plenary, and the summary from there is as follows. The first issue, after the signing of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, governments must ratify it and follow their national constitutions to ensure that the agreement is domesticated as soon as possible. Domestic laws must be able to accommodate implementation of the agreement. The next outcome, governments, business, and civil society must engage with each other in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Next outcome, implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will need the support of other services such as industrial development, education and skills training, infrastructure services in energy, communication networks such as rail, road, and maritime. This support will enable the production and movement of goods across borders among countries. The next summary on the plenary, 2, on jobs, youth, and women. And the outcome, the assets of Africa are its people. 60% of the African population is young, under 40 years old, and 60% of African citizens are either unemployed or grossly underemployed. Africa must use its social capital to develop the continent using all its available tools, including policies and regulatory frameworks. Next outcome, gender inequality costs African countries $96 billion, which is 6% of its GDP every year. Gender equality is not only the right thing for African countries, but also the smart thing to do to ensure inclusiveness. Louder. Next outcome, women need to have access to business organization networks, access to capital and finance, and access to trade information. Governments and private sector need to educate the youth and women, create conducive environment and opportunities for women, and provide proper information and access to policymakers and the private sector. Then after that, we had Plenary 3 on technology, innovation, and intra-African trade. The summary here is as follows. Financial inclusion through mobile payments and mobile wallets that come to the market is key to moving the continent forward. Smartphone with quality control penetration will change education and healthcare systems. Next outcome, the private sector is ready and have open markets changes the whole region, and to have open markets changes the whole ball game. There is therefore the need to encourage the governments not ready to sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement to do so, and when it comes to implementation, name and shame those who do not do so. Next outcome, the future of the African Continental Free Trade Area needs platforms. First, it is infrastructure. Cross-border flow of data has surpassed the flow of goods. Secondly, content platforms to tell our own story. Thirdly, financial platforms such as mobile wallets. Why not create a Pan-African digital money? A question was asked. We need to identify platforms which are secure to trade and trade facilitation, which is also secure. A question was asked, how does Africa catch up with the technology and innovation? There is therefore need to build a trust economy, which requires partnership between entrepreneurs and government, and also need to create an African wallet for business. The last output under this section was, Africa needs to go through digital transformation fast. The 7 key things are connect, educate, demonstrate and promote, innovate, invest and regulate, need for mindset shift, technology move fast, regulators need to trust and regulate for speed and empowerment instead of looking at themselves as reference. The last panel is on financing intra-African trade, and the summary is as follows. Governments need to work on the harmonization of regulatory policies related to trade finance across African countries in order to make them more conducive to business and facilitate the development of innovative trade finance solutions. The next outcome, African governments and continental and regional banks and financial institutions should start the dialogue on African currencies in order to address the issue of convertibility of the several African currencies that currently exist and one of the biggest challenges to African traders that they currently face. In the meantime, the African Export Bank should work with the African Development Bank, other regional and national banks to roll out its Pan-African payment and settlement system and gradually extend it to the entire continent. The next outcome, the need for continuous dialogue, engagement between the private sector and the public sector on trade finance issues through platforms like the African Business Forum, which should be institutionalized. That's the end of the summary of the outcome. If there are any gaps, indicate that there are gaps. Thank you very much. Now, before I yield the floor, just give me, before I yield the floor, one quick announcement is that those who received invitations to be in the plenary tomorrow, they should be near the plenary by 9 hours. The first hour of the meeting, which starts at 10 hours, is going to be closed session by heads of state and government. Thereafter, everybody will be allowed to come in. So please gather around by 9 hours. And after this, let me indicate that our duty as African Union Commission is, once the agreement is signed, is to start working on producing a business guide to the African Continental Free Trade Area so that people are able to have a very good understanding of these contents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Albert Muchanga, and thank you for the hard work that you have done to make today a possibility. Thank you. Before we take the vote of thanks, I would like to just give the microphone to another very important individual who's been instrumental, the President of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Nana Dankwa-Woso. Please, say just 1 minute to, for a vote of congratulations, I suppose.
Thank you, Mark. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm here and I'm so happy, so excited, and I don't know what to do. Because the next day, that is tomorrow, a serious thing is going to happen. Another freedom is going to be given to us. A new dawn. And I want to take this opportunity to commend all of you, especially the AU Commission, for their support, ATPC, UNECA, African Heads of States, ECA, Afriism, EcoBank, and what have you. Seriously, there was a Prosperity for Africa conference in Ghana in September last year, and that was with the theme Prosperity for Africa. And that was where we were able to come up with our inputs and send it to AU. Seriously, God has been on our side, and this is how far the Lord has brought us. And with this, I want to commend all of us and to say thank you, Lord, and thank you all of you for your support and encouragement. May the Lord bless us all.
Amen, amen, amen. Finally, last of all, I'm going to call, this is about not just about our generation, it's about the next generation. So to give the vote of thanks by the representative of the government of Rwanda, I'm going to call on Patrick Buchana Nsenga, Private Sector Federation, Chamber of Youth from Rwanda. Give him a round of applause, please. I can see that the people are streaming out, but you still have a few minutes.
Just to speed it up, all protocol observed. Dignitaries, business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Patrick Buchana, and I'm the CEO of AC Group, a company that has digitized public transport payments. And it's an honor today, especially as a young Rwandan, to give a vote of thanks on this remarkable day where we have had multi-stakeholder discussions on forging a path to a single digital African market. Allow me to extend special appreciation to the heads of state and the African Union for achieving this great milestone after decades, as well as involve the private sector. For so long, our continent, with a fast-growing young population, has struggled with limited growth of SMEs, unemployment, significant deficits in meeting the demands of trade finance in Africa. Today, steps in the right direction have been taken. The CFTA not only presents a lot of opportunities for the future of Africa, but also finally draws a clear roadmap for growth of SMEs and business on the continent. It's no doubt it's going to be a very complex process in implementing the objectives of the CFTA and realizing the true benefits of the one single African market. But we pledge our support as the private sector and as the youth of Africa. In conclusion, as the saying goes, to whom much is given, much is expected. As the private sector, this calls for us to work twice as hard together with governments to break down the walls that have confined us so that we can create millions of jobs, transform the lives of Africans to the last remote areas of the continent. We thank you, and we wish the best of luck to our heads of state tomorrow during the signing. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Patrick. Patrick from the Chamber of Youth in Rwanda. Patrick, you have the final word. Before I conclude, I will say that from 7 to 9 o'clock, there's the AFCFTA cocktail networking reception hosted by the Rwanda Private Sector Federation. That's at the Kigali Cultural Village. So please come to the cocktail networking from 7 to 9 at the Kigali Cultural Village. I'll share a glass of red wine with you, not all of you, as I will never make it out of there, but with a few of you. And I'll finally, all that remains is to say thank you very much. I've really had a good time. This concludes the first ever African Continental Free Trade Area Business Forum. The press conference is taking place in the Media Center for all those who want to join. The joint press conference is in the Media Center going on right now.